Hi, Happy New Year. So surprise, don't think that this is going to be a common thing. I'm not planning on making these videos where you see my face because I don't even like listening to my voice to edit, let alone having to watch myself as well. So anyway, here we go. I thought that what I'd do is do a brief video to explain how I'm doing my bullet journal this year and how I'm changing it and why I'm changing it, and then show you the setup for 2026. I nearly said 2026. So I'm keeping my planning journal. So this is the journal that I use to go through and say, what are my themes? What am I going to do? Here's one from 2023. So, here are some sketches. Here is, what I'm pulling together. This is my quote, blah, blah, blah. So I thought I'd still keep that because I quite like having that journal. So it's going to stay. Then comes my bullet journal itself. So for the last couple of years, things have been a little bit with my bullet journal. In 2023, near the end of the year, 2023, I'm taking myself back way too far. All right, reset. We're now in 2026. All right, in 2024, at the end of the year, I had a whole heap of client work, a lot of different clients, and I was finding that my bullet journal wasn't really keeping up. It wasn't keeping up with what I needed it to be. And so that's when I brought this into my system. So this is my project binder. It's a place where I go through, and when I get a piece of client work, I create like a little client sheet and have all the information in there. I also have sheets for my projects. So, all of those things exist in there, and it has nearly a quarterly schedule in front of it as well. So I found that that was really important for me when I've got a lot of disparate work on. Like at one point I had 12 clients on the go, and am I waiting on something from this person? Where am I on this one? It just all got a bit much to try and manage in my bullet journal. So I took it out. I'm keeping that. For the last 6 months, that hasn't been overly important because I haven't had a lot of client work, but I have used the project section for my projects. So for my Oracle cards, for example. So yeah, it's staying. I quite like it. It's effective. So that's what we're going to do. So that's staying in the system. But for my actual bullet journal itself, I'm making a little bit of a change for a couple of reasons. The first is that it hasn't been working very well when I haven't had a whole heap of client work, because the task management itself isn't overly difficult, but at the same time, what I've found is it's not sort of remaining front and center in my life. And so it sort of goes onto the dining room table and ends up staying there for too long. So I don't have my tasks readily available and readily handy. So in December, and sort of near the end of November, but definitely in December, what I did was trial what I'm planning on doing for next year, and it worked quite well. And that's this. I've been using these cards. These were part of the desk calendar that I did in 2024, and I've got a heap of them left over. So what I've been doing is using the whole thing. So I'm not really using the highlights section as highlights. I'm just using them as task cards. And I basically fill it in and then sit it in front of my monitor, and my tasks are just front and center. And I'm finding that that is a little bit better for me to stay focused and to sort of work around, prioritizing and just staying on top of things without feeling just that little bit of, I've got to go check, I finished that thing that I was doing. What's the next thing I was going to do? And having to go back and check it in my bullet journal. So that meant I can take tasks out of here entirely. They're only going on these. So it's been an interesting shift. And look, I haven't had a heap of client work again in December, but I found that it worked really well. And so I'm keeping that. What else? What does that mean, for my bullet journal itself? Well, it means that what's going to be able to happen, hopefully, is that I can fit an entire calendar year into one journal. So I've only ever been able to fit 9 months into a journal because of all, it's basically a week to a double page, and all of the other trackers and reflection and all the other things that I do in there mean that I can really only fit 9 months in comfortably. So I wanted to try and be able to have a year in a bullet journal. And that's the reason that I went, let's try the actual Ryder Carroll way of doing this. Now, I haven't taken everything out of it, so I still will have in here, I'm still going to have tasks with this as well. I will still, record them down like what I did each day and have a little bit of a journal for each day, but just a very simple statement like I sort of do normally anyway. It is where I'm going to track my schedule. I still am going to have a title page for each month, so that will still be a bit of my creative practice. I will still have a quote of some description, and you'll see that later. But I will be tracking mood and tracking achievements, and that's sort of it. So it's not going to have nearly as much drawing in it as they have had for the last few years that I've been doing this, which means that, that's great. They will hopefully be a little bit easier on my brain to do, and I might get these videos out on time. Who knows? But that's sort of how the bullet journaling thing is going. So that means it's freed up a little bit of my space around, well, what do I want my art practice then to look like? Because my bullet journal has very much been my art practice. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do this. So I am going to have an art journal, which makes sense. It's nice and simple and easy. I've played around with art journaling a little bit in the last sort of year or so. So here's one I prepared earlier. And I quite like sort of like the art journaling because I get to play with all sorts of different mediums, and it's really nice thick card. So, I get to play around with paint and Poscas and stamps and stencils and stickers and all sorts of fun things in here as well. So I'm going to play a little bit more with this sort of stuff. And that's going to be an art practice for me as a weekly, monthly and quarterly reflection. So that's what I'm planning on putting into this art journal. Now, will I get an entire year into one journal? I don't know. That one was card. The one that I've picked to do this with, it's a little bit thinner. Like it's not quite as thick a card. It's a little bit of a thinner card, but it will still take a lot more beating than the 160 GSM paper that's in the Archer and Olive journals, because they're not designed for this. They're designed for journaling rather than art. So that's going to be a little bit of my art practice, and that will be because I'm taking reflection out of my bullet journal. It's going to go into that. And so there's a little bit of other space around having an art practice that this is something, it's not new. I've done it a few times. I did it very consistently for about 6 or 7 months in early 2024. And, another couple of months in 2023. Like, it's something that I've actually done quite a bit of, and that's postcards. So postcard size art is great because it takes me about 15 minutes to half an hour, depending on what I'm going to do. Again, I can do all sorts of different mediums. So I can do watercolor and markers, or I can do acrylic pens, or I can do alcohol markers. So I can do all sorts of different things in here as well. And it's just another way for me to express myself and a nice, succinct sort of way of doing that. I use them basically as a setup process of a morning. So it's a little bit of a reflective practice to set me up for the day. By that I mean I sort of sit down, have a cup of tea, get whatever I think I want to use, sit down and create for 15 minutes to half an hour. During that time, I'll be checking with myself. How am I feeling today? How much energy do I think I have? What are the things that I have to deliver today? Or do I have a bit of freedom to work on different things? And then what do I feel like then? Do I feel like doing work on X project or Y project? Do I really feel like drawing a lot on the computer today, or is there something else that I need to be doing? So I can sort of do that little bit of a check-in and see how I am. And that very much allows me to know how much I can push myself for the day. So I found that to be really good in the past. And then when I get really, really busy, I don't do it because I use a lot of my creativity with my client work and it falls by the wayside. And when you haven't done something for a little bit, it just seems really hard to pick it back up again. So I'm doing basically what I had set up when I was doing this before, which is I have a little basket, and in that basket I just have some watercolors, some pens, some like alcohol markers, a couple of little bits and pieces, and some postcards. Now the postcards that I use, I have some that are watercolor and I have some that are just cartridge paper. And I basically have them all together and they sit on the dining room table. So I'm completely removing a barrier of, well, I've got to go find all the stuff and get it all together and do all of this sort of bits and pieces. I don't have to do that. And honestly, one of the hardest things when you're trying to do a sort of an art practice is just keep yourself in a place where you're not introducing barriers. And having to actually collect all of your stuff together to pull it all together and sit down and create is actually the biggest barrier that I've always encountered. So I've got my little kit set up again. It's on my dining room table, so I can start bringing that back in. So what I'm going to do is switch over, and you can see now a quick video sort of showing you what this system is, the 4 parts of this system. So I have a system that is going to be my planning journal and my bullet journal and task cards. They are going to be tracking my tasks, schedule, achievements, moods, and daily sort of journaling as well as planning for that journal. I'm going to have number 2, which is about my projects, be they for clients or myself, and the quarterly schedule. Number 3 is my art journal, and that's going to be basically reflections and lessons. And number 4 is my daily-ish art practice, which is going to be centered around creating postcard size art. So yeah, that's basically the changes and a little bit about why I'm making those changes. So what I'm going to do now is start drawing up what 2026 is going to look like in my journal. So a couple of themes and what is going to be in this planning journal, and then we'll get stuck into drawing up the admin pages in my bullet journal. There'll be another video that will come out in a couple of days that is the setup of January. I hope you've had a lovely new year. I had planned on doing this before New Year's, but I hope that you've had a lovely break if you got to have one, and that 2026 is going to be a significantly better year for all of us. Fingers crossed. Okay, I shall move on to the next bit of the video. Okay, so the themes, these are of course subject to change. January I'm going to do moths and butterflies, and then in February I'm doing jars again because my oracle cards should be here in February. I'm going to do florist because I enjoyed doing that previously. Snails might expand out into more than just snails. Mushrooms, forest, flowers, cafe, under the sea, succulents, farm, so some sort of farm theme, and then I don't know what for December. What's actually going to be captured in here is a little bit different than before just because I don't have as many design elements that I have to capture. As I mentioned, I'm only doing a title page and then I'm doing a quote. So I'll have to design, explore, and do all of that stuff for those. And then whether I'm going to do any pop-ups or anything else in there as well. Now we're drawing up the actual bullet journal itself. So with this, what I'm having to do is just stick my old journal underneath so that it's a flat surface, because when you start a new journal, it's very lopsided and it makes it difficult to draw. So I'm keeping my future log because, of course, I'm keeping my future log. I cannot imagine that you could do a bullet journal without one. So that's definitely going to be in here. And yeah, I've sped this up pretty quickly because you really don't need to see me drawing up a calendar in real time at all. But I'll still leave a little bit in here so I've got a little bit of time to just talk about a couple of things. I used to draw just a calendar all by itself, and then I saw someone put the actual calendar elements into their future log, and I went, that's an amazing idea and will save me so much space. I normally only do 3 months to a page. I did 4 months to a page this time so that, again, it's just reducing the amount of space things are taking up. So that's why I sort of crammed it in a little bit more. And I've often found that I don't use that much space in them, so it's perfectly fine. Then I've got my 3 words for 2026. They are embrace, transform, and plan. So I'm going to write a blog post about them because I always do, but basically I'm in a period of transition. So, you know, there's a few different things that are going on, and we're sort of moving into retirement phase, which seems bizarre. I'm not old enough to retire, but my partner is 5 years older than me, so that sort of, you know, gives me a little bit of flex in that space. My goals, I've kept it a little bit tighter this year because I had a few too many, I think, for last year. So selling my Oracle cards, so getting them out in the world. I really want to have a greater impact through training, so I want to get more of my training courses out into the world. I need to get more physical strength back. I just do. I need to keep shifting my mindset around my role in the world because especially sort of thinking about if I'm not working anymore, what does that mean? Keeping on my photography journey, so continuing to learn and play and discover new things. And then the last goal I have there is to start my next creative project because, you know, my Oracle cards will soon be done. So that was a book last year and then the cards. And so what's next? Because apparently I need creative projects to keep myself engaged. I mean, tell me something I didn't know about myself. But yeah, it's always nice to have those things. So like I said, I had a few too many goals last year. I probably had about 3 more than what's in here. And I just found that I didn't really do them justice. So instead of, you know, keeping a lot of goals, I thought I would just shift back a little bit into only having, you know, 6 fairly high level ones. I mean, a couple of them are pretty significant, but yeah, there you go. I have my achievement tracking. So I've done this for a couple of years and I actually find it's really important because it is so easy for me to forget all the work that I do. You know, all the client work, but then also just all the little random things that I create. I can lose track of it all. And yeah, I just find that it's nicer for me to actually have a space where I'm capturing achievements. And some of them may not seem like achievements, they might be something else, but that's what I call it. So I've got making and creating the books I've read and or listened to. My clients, all I do in here is list my clients because, again, I can sort of forget some of them sometimes. That's not a slight on any of my clients. And then a space for me to capture new skills or knowledge. So I used to call this the courses section, but then there are bits and pieces that sometimes I feel, you know, it's probably worthwhile me capturing it when I didn't get it out of a course. So it might be something from a podcast. It might be something from, there are different sources. So I thought I'd just put in a little place in there where I can note some of those things. And then we have the mood tracker. Now, the mood tracker has had a varied history in my bullet journal. I used to capture it a month on a page and have little symbols that I would colour in. Then I went to 6 months on a double page spread. Now that I'm trying to fit my entire bullet journal into a year, I want to try to capture a year in one go as well. And so what I'm going to do with it is basically, set it up like this, and I'll bring in the other journal over and show you in a second. But I'm going to sort of capture it as sort of a dot for each day, and that dot will be either placed in low, medium, high, so like this, and then I will join those dots together, and that'll give me basically a trend line. And then at the end, I've got a little space here for big events. So was there something really big that happened that month that affected my mood, either positively or negatively? They are my admin pages. It is very, very trimmed down from previous years, and let's see how we go. So thanks for being here and listening to me ramble a little bit about how I'm going to set everything up and what I'm planning on doing. The January video will be out in the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you. Bye.